Scotia Investments Jamaica Limited held an interesting web seminar focusing on growth enhancement measures for the Jamaican economy. The April 2011 webinar, as it was called, was moderated by Scotia Investments Vice President Dr. Adrian Stokes and included Scotiabank's President Bruce Bowen, Head of the Department of Economics UII, Dr. Damien, President of the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce, Milton, Samuda, and the President of the Jamaica Exporters Association, Vitus. Scotiabank's President Bruce Bowen sees great economic opportunities in Jamaica at this time, but suggested more action and less talk. He opined that leadership and accountability in both the public and the private sectors were necessary ingredients.
Well, first of all, it is a very fitting time to be talking about growth. I think we got to start the discussion by recognizing the huge progress we've made in the last 12 months to get stability in the economy and inflation and exchange rate, interest rates coming down, confidence starting to come back. And beyond that, the point was made, we know the issues we need to be talking about. We need to be maintaining fiscal discipline. We need to make sure that the gains we've made in the last year, that we continue them, that we start seeing the debt to GDP coming down, and that we start seeing the government using some of the resources being freed up to go into prudently stimulating the economy. We need to make sure we're investing in education, that we're getting the most out of our people, because that in the end is the engine that drives growth. We need to make sure that we continue to develop the financial sector so that banking becomes more efficient, so that there's more avenues for people to raise money, that unit trusts and mutual funds grow, that capital markets can develop efficiently. So all those things have to happen. And while we can debate the exact measures to make it happen, we know the issues. To me, the big difference, what's going to determine whether we're successful or not, is, as you said, can we translate these ideas into action? I say among Scotiabank all the time that I'd rather take a mediocre strategy well executed than the best strategy in the world that sits on a shelf. So we have to come up with a strategy, make the tough choices of where our priorities are going to be, but then ensure that those ideas get into actionable plans and that people are assigned responsibility and held accountable to implement the things we talk about, because we aren't short of plans. The other thing I believe that we're missing is strong leadership, and not in any particular sector. I'm not pointing to the government, I'm not pointing to private sector, because I don't think any one segment of the population or of the society can really make it happen alone. We need strong leaders that are prepared to work together, not to point fingers and tell people, you should do this and you should do that, and ignore myself, but to sit down, realize that the ideal solution for the country is going to have some good in it for me, is going to have some challenge for me. Every one of us is going to have that, but be committed to a strategy, leave the room, and ensure that it can be executed. If we can do that, the issues we know we have to do are out there. That will make the difference.
So there are accountability gaps in both the public and private sector you're seeing.
Right.
Eh?
Yeah, I think it's not a unique thing in Jamaica. It is. We sometimes feel the challenges we have, we're alone in them. We tend to. Everyone likes to talk about what they can do. The tough thing, the hard work. What has made us successful is a culture of maybe not even having the greatest strategies, but what we have been very good at is putting hard-working people that aren't trying to just stand up and make a name talking, but will sit down, come up with a plan, work at it day in and day out, knowing that accomplishing things, really making a difference, is boring work. It's that every day in and out, going into the office, doing what I'm doing, and ensuring that I'm sticking with and have perseverance to stick with a plan that I believe in.
Dr. Damien King, head of the Department of Economics at the University of the West Indies, identified what he said were three main areas of focus to develop Jamaica's economy.
As I thought about what the growth enhancement strategies should be, it occurred to me that there was nothing new to be said. And the reason why there was nothing new to be said is that everything we need to talk about in terms of growth enhancement strategy in Jamaica is already in the public arena. When you look at what was proposed, for example, in the PSOJ framework last year, and in the PIOJ's new growth inducement strategy that was released last month, and in both the Matalon Committee and the blueprint for tax reform of last year, and in the World Bank Country Economic Memorandum of 2005. And you sort of scan all of those, you realize that all of the fundamental growth enhancement issues are raised in those documents. What strikes you is the remarkable lack of contradiction when you go through. Even though they have different focuses sometimes, there's a remarkable lack of contradiction in those documents. So there is a consensus that is already in the public arena about what are the appropriate growth inducement strategies for Jamaica. And all of them have to do with three areas. One is the process by which policy is made. That is to say, economic governance. Under that heading comes the proposal, talked about for a long time, that monetary policy, interest rate changes, for example, should be governed by a monetary policy committee that is constituted by members inside and outside the central bank, and that publishes the minutes of the committee after some time period has passed. These reports speak to the importance of having a fiscal responsibility framework that puts parameters around how budgets are constructed. They talk about having consolidated budgets that include not only the central government, but also the public enterprises and other public sector entities. A second area that is addressed by this collection of documents is getting a balanced budget. It is again widely recognized that Jamaica has run fiscal deficits almost every single year since independence, except for a handful. And as long as you continue to run fiscal deficits, you can't bring down your debt. And so a lot of the measures address that issue. It talks about eliminating GCT exemptions and non-standard rates. Pretty much every single one of the documents address that issue. It talks about reforming the tax incentive regime. So it is not arbitrary the way it is now, focusing on an ad hoc collection of sectors, and that foregoes loads of revenue. And the third area that is addressed by all of these documents is removing the obstacles to production and commerce. For example, they all speak about tax reform to simplify Jamaica's tax code, which is stunning in its complexity and difficult therefore to navigate if you are trying to run a business and produce and create wealth. A lot of them talk about lowering the corporate income tax rate and about building, enhancing and maintaining the economic infrastructure. It is not only an embarrassment, but a hidden cost of doing business that all the roads you drive on, well not all of them, but many of them, are potholed and cratered to a degree that looks like it is post-war. So, this information is out there. It is already in the public arena. But when you read the newspaper and you listen to the budget debates and the budget presentations, what is it that you actually see government? Government is not doing any of these things. What you see government doing instead is the Ministry of Commerce wants to build an IT park out in Caymanas. This is nowhere in any of these proposals. In yesterday's paper, the Ministry of Tourism, once again, wants to subsidize airlift into Jamaica, while we are subsidizing the vacations of rich foreigners, which is on no economic foundation that I'm aware of, is a mystery to me. But that is what is being proposed. That is what is going to be done once again. And that is nowhere in these proposals. The Ministry of Finance, for a time, and the Prime Minister's office last year proposed removing the customs user fee that manufacturers pay for importation of raw materials. Again, nowhere in the documentation and the existing proposals on growth enhancement strategies. And of course, the Ministry of Agriculture tells us that we should eat what we grow and grow what we eat. Nowhere in the proposals. So it seems to me that we already have a collection of growth enhancement strategies from different sources, all of which have a consensus, but very little of which is being implemented. And when we look at what is being implemented, we find it nowhere in the growth enhancement strategies. That, it seems to me, is the crux of the problem. In thinking about growth enhancement strategies, what comes across is that the problem is not an absence of knowledge about the strategies. It is, why is it the strategies are already in the public debate, already in the public arena, but somehow there is this disconnection between that consensus and what is actually done. And perhaps that actually should be the subject of the next Scotia Investment Seminar.
Thank you, Damien.
Now, the president of the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce, Milton Samuda, pointed out the need for job creation programs and an increase in the productivity and international competitiveness of Jamaica's workforce.
I want to give a different framework with some underpinnings that I think we can all identify with, and to say that much of what Bruce and Damien have addressed previously, I think many of us in the private sector identify with. The topic this morning, growth enhancing measures for the Jamaican economy, fits neatly into the primary activity which the JCC has identified for itself in 2011. And that activity is in fact a direct result of our first proposal, which is that there has to be a fundamental shift in mindset in how we assess performance. We start with mindset because so much of what mankind achieves starts in the mind. On Sunday, November 20, 2010, I launched what was called the JCC's Growth Agenda campaign during a speech to the Westmoreland Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And that launch came out of a previous address to the Rotary Club of Kingston on Thursday, November 18, 2010, in which I asserted that, and I quote, economic growth is the great imperative for Jamaica in the 21st century, unquote. That view was embraced by the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce and led to the adoption of the Growth Agenda for Jamaica, which simply put is an insistence that all stakeholders, government, opposition, private sector, unions, civil society, and citizens generally, must sign on to the imperative of economic growth, and that all national strategies and programs must be geared towards and judged against that imperative. In our view, there is no goal, no aim, no destination for Jamaica more imperative than constant, robust economic growth. And every single Jamaican must get involved. So when you look at our national strategies, whether it be for education, labor, sports, culture, tourism, mining, energy, whatever it is, you must judge those strategies against their ability to contribute to economic growth. And by way of example, I just want to indicate that when I say everything, literally everything can be tweaked in that way. If you think about our welfare system, for example, in about November of last year, the Prime Minister, and I commended him for it, announced that they would be adding a new dimension to the PATH program, which would create a welfare to work sub-program to make sure that people didn't stay on the PATH program forever. And it is interesting that that announcement was made at the launch of the latest Jamaica Survey of Living Conditions report, which confirmed the continued rise in poverty from 9.9% in 2007 to 16.5% in 2009. So I think it is clear that even in relation to welfare, you have to move towards growth. The second thing is, of course, you can't have growth without job creation, because you have to put people to work. So our second proposal, well within our growth agenda, is to insist that we all create an environment for job creation. And I say all because it can't be left only to the government. Much of what we now suffer is because the government has been placed in the position of primary driver of the economy. The fact is that what we need to do, as Damien indicated, is already in the public domain, and there's already consensus around it. We know that you need to contain crime, we know that you need to eliminate bureaucracy, or at least reduce it to tolerable levels. We know that you have to reduce the size of government. We know that interest rates have to come down, as Bruce indicated. We know that you have to promote public-private partnerships and vigorously promote local investment in much the same way that you now promote foreign direct investment. It's all there. And of course, you have to eliminate corruption. And by the way, that means eliminating corruption on both sides of the fence. Because if somebody in the public sector is accepting a bribe, it means that somebody in the private sector is paying it. And we need to look at both. The third proposal is in relation to our workforce. Yes, you get people back to work, but that alone isn't enough. We must make them productive and internationally competitive. And we should be reminded that over the period 1972 to 2017, the productivity of the Jamaican worker declined by an average of 1.3% per annum, while our Latin American and Caribbean neighbors were experiencing labor productivity growth averaging more than 1.5% per annum. In fact, in the 5-year period, 2003 to 2007, labor productivity growth in Latin America and the Caribbean accelerated to over 2% per annum, while the output produced by the Jamaican worker on average declined by 1.8%. That underproductivity is one of the bases for our increasing poverty and, of course, the lack of growth. So one of the sub-imperatives is that at the macro level, government, and at the micro level, the private sector must create the environment for greater worker productivity. And it cannot be the fault of the Jamaican worker alone, because after all, this is the same man or woman who, after 1.5 hours in the air, suddenly becomes productive when they land in the USA. So there must be something fundamental that we can do. Fourth, I think we need to look at how we save. We need to teach Jamaica to save. Spending is important, it's a great stimulus for economic activity, but saving is critical, and we need to teach and encourage responsible spending and equally responsible saving. We cannot continue to live off of the effort and savings of others, whether through loans or through remittances from family. Improving our savings has to be part of our growth agenda. I point you to the growth report, Strategies for Sustained Growth and Inclusive Development, from the Commission on Growth and Development, in which it identified high levels of savings and investment as one of the critical factors in the success of 13 economies, which within the period commencing 1950 have grown at an average rate of 7% a year or more for 25 years or longer. That's not a coincidence. If we need to refashion our education system, can't be left out. Bruce alluded to it. The education system fundamentally has to address growth. You need to literally teach the imperative of growth in the schools so that your curricula starts to reflect what is necessary to enhance growth. So from the earliest stages, you need to teach the thrift, teach the value of hard work, teach tourism, teach the benefit of foreign investment, the benefit of monetizing talent and innovation, especially in a creatively rich country like Jamaica. Teach the economic enhancement that goes with science and technology. And importantly, we must fit our children for the jobs that, not that are needed now, but that will be needed 10 years from now. Lastly, I think we need to create a meritocracy. One in which we recognize and salute excellence. One in which advancement occurs because it is merited and not, for example, because of connections. Our failure to insist on standards and excellence has resulted in a sort of pernicious mediocrity that's almost ubiquitous in nature. And so nowadays, every time we espy something that is of excellence, the shouts go up in our most orgasmic fashion. We have to insist, and more importantly, we who insist have to act on the standards that we set for others. So, in the private sector, for example, we can't speak about integrity while facilitating corruption. We can't speak about efficiency while participating in the institutionalization of bureaucracy, or pay lip service to morality and decency while we redefine those to accommodate our own behaviors. Now, you know, people may say that, well, what does that really have to do with economic growth? But the truth of the matter is that the growth agenda has to be based on how it is we operate and how it is we do business. Importantly, it has to operate also on the messages that we send. So again, looking at my own sphere, the private sector, you can't, in the one breath, put on a suit, go with a check for $5,000, give it to a needy school, take a photo opportunity, do that on Monday, and then on Friday, you put on a polo shirt, branded, walk with a check for $500,000, and give it in donation for the staging of a show in which all of the values and attitudes that you want to encourage in the society, including disdain for criminality, will in fact be eroded. The growth agenda, ladies and gentlemen, is a national agenda which calls for every Jamaican who means the country well to become immediately engaged in advancing our thrust for national growth. It is a common script which we must all read from and act out in unison, and which dictates across the political and social divides. In going for growth, there's no labor and management, no public and private sector, no PNP, JLP or other P, no governing party and opposition. We are all to concentrate on the centrality of the push towards overriding, overarching, underpinning economic growth. Finally, the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce wants to identify with the view that the fundamentals are now starting to trend in the correct direction. There has been tremendous achievement in terms of a return to fiscal discipline and the stabilization of the macroeconomic framework. But that alone is not enough. Stagnation is oftentimes mistaken for stability. We now need stimulus, and that is what we have to agree on.
President of the Jamaica Exporters Association, Vitus Evans, gave his recommendations for enhancing the growth of Jamaica's economy from the perspective of the export sector. Evans opined that various export strategies for growth existed for increasing regional competitiveness and for the use of alternative energy. However, he said, these have largely not been put into practice.
As Damien said, we believe that when it comes to exports, it has been said over and over, that we need to move away from actually believing that we can actually continue to borrow and continue and expect the economy to grow. It has been said over and over again that we need to actually earn our way out of our present predicament. And export growth is one of the major areas to actually achieve that. And to that extent, I mean, we have had on the table for over 2 years now the National Export Strategy that was actually prepared together with the public and private sectors. And all the stakeholders were involved in preparing the export strategy. Yet 2 years on, we're looking at, of course, the lack of implementation is actually what is holding us back. We took time to identify 8 sectors of the economy that we believe could have actually provided, had the potential for growth in the short to medium term. We felt that there were some low-hanging fruits that could actually be achieved, and build on those sectors to move on to the other sectors and actually achieve the kind of export growth and, by extension, the growth of the economy that we were seeking. But 2 years on, as I said, the implementation is nowhere down the road. And that's one of the reasons why I actually made some comments last week prior to the budget to actually ask the government to show the commitment and demonstrate that commitment in terms of what they do, in terms of actually ensuring that we believe that exports has a great potential of actually getting us out of the present predicament. We have identified what needs to be done by the various ministries if we actually going to actually implement successfully the strategy. And we hope that in this budget, that budget allocation will be made to the various ministries to actually ensure that they actually address the issues that we've actually identified within both the sectoral issues that needs to be addressed, as well as the specific sectoral issues within the various ministries. The issue of alternative energy, again, we are looking at the efficiencies of our firm. The issue of alternative energy is actually brought up by Bruce and has been over and over, but recently we've actually heard that there's a policy now in place, but we need to see some specific measures that demonstrate that commitment to move to that extent. I mean, by now we should be following what happened a lot in Barbados, Eastern Caribbean, where you find that there is tax relief to actually implement a solar system. And we have plenty of we know what's happening, both in terms of solar and wind energy, and I think we need to actually look at those areas. We have a situation where we actually signed the Economic Partnership Agreement, the EPA agreement, back in 2007. And the European Commission has made quite a bit of money available for specific initiatives to actually ensure that we can improve our exports to Europe. That, again, we have actually failed on that. There's nothing happening. From the JEA point of view, we put some specific initiatives on the table. We went as far as actually getting the European Commission to actually consider extending 11 million euros to us to support the project, the program that we had on the table. But again, we had the incursion downtown, and then they saw the need to actually have that funds diverted to other areas. Now, whilst we recognize the need for social intervention, and that certainly must go hand in hand with the economic growth that we try to get, but you need to have a balance. You need to ensure that you have the growth that will actually provide you with the kind of financials that will actually be able to finance your social program. We also turn to the issue of our competitiveness. Again, I believe we take a trip to Trinidad with the Minister of Industry, Investment and Commerce just a few weeks ago. And one of the things we went down to Trinidad hoping to actually knock them on the head about was the competitive advantage we thought that they had when it came to energy costs. But they were able to point out that in most of the manufacturing entities, energy formed no more than 4 or 5% of their total manufacturing costs. So that really does give you that great an advantage. And strange enough, Milton, as much as he said that our productivity of our workers have dropped and it's low, they felt that that was an area where we had a competitive advantage because they felt that our productivity in Jamaica was higher than theirs in Trinidad. But you could see the level of retooling that takes place. I know there's a lot of questions about the waivers that exist. And tax reform, again, is an area where we are fully committed from the export sector to actually have a comprehensive tax reform package. But whilst we remain uncompetitive as a sector, and the waivers have come in, it is difficult to say that to give up those waivers until you can see a comprehensive tax reform package that will actually address these inefficiencies that exist within the system. I mean, no one likes the fact that subsectors are identified and are given what we call privileges, but that in itself points to the inequality of the tax system that we have existing, and the fact that that needs to be actually addressed. And again, there's been a lot of discussions on that recently, and we hope that we will see concrete measures to actually get us moving in that direction. I turn finally now with a statement to the whole area of the fact that the fundamentals at the macro level are great. I mean, Milton actually reeled it out. I mean, you have a stable exchange rate, inflation is now being stable, you have interest rates coming down, something we've been asking for some time in the productive sector. But we haven't seen the firms are coming up front to actually say, well, let us actually take advantage of this situation. It may well be a question of confidence, and it may take some time. But my own view, which I want to put on the table for discussion, is something that I've been thinking for some time, is that I believe now we really have to look at the competitiveness of our firms, the individual firms, at the macro level. I believe that we have to see there must be some structural impediments to our firms that actually make them uncompetitive to go out there and act. It's just a question of not retooling to actually take advantage of the new technology. I believe that, starting from the mindset, Milton, but I believe we have to actually break down our firms in compartments and see exactly what is happening from management all the way down, because I believe there is something inherently wrong in terms of the way our firms operate, not only within the climate, but within the structure of the firms itself. And it's something that I've been putting on the table, hoping to get some currency and some traction to see that we have greater discussion around that area if we are to achieve the goals that we're looking for.
The Scotia Investments web seminar on April 20, 2011 came at an opportune time when the island's political leaders are focusing on the 2011-2012 budget. The webinar was produced for Scotiabank by All Media Services Limited.